Mr. Barsamian, thank you very much for this interview. So, first question is, you know that Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan twice visited to United States, so we have some kind of high-ranking Armenian officials who also visited many times.
Sure.
Yeah. To United States. So what's the talks in Washington corridors on US-Armenian relations, especially after Pashinyan's recent visit to United States?
Thanks, Sargis. Good to see you again, as always. I think the visits were very good. I think that the more Prime Minister Pashinyan comes to the United States, the better it is. The meetings are always helpful, are always positive. I was with him when he was in New York. He visited California, New York, and not this time DC, but I think soon, a visit to Washington. But he's been meeting with the congressional delegations. I know Frank Pallone, Jackie Spears, Judy Chu were just here in Armenia about a week ago. So the contacts are growing. The earmark for spending has grown, and Jackie Spears has put in this supplemental for $40 million for Armenia, which I believe actually is coming through. It's something that we've worked on the hills of Congress very hard. So I think his contacts and the government contacts, because many of his ministers have also come to Washington and to the United States. Speaker Mirzoyan was there this year. Deputy Prime Minister was there. Obviously, Zorab Menatsahanin, Foreign Minister, comes back and forth quite regularly.
So if we're talking about opinions in Washington regarding US-Armenian relations, especially after those visits, what can you say on this?
So since the revolution, Armenia's stake has gone up. It was clear that Armenia is a democracy. The Velvet Revolution has demonstrated something that is unique in the region. We have Azerbaijan next door that is a dictatorship compared to how Armenia is perceived. Therefore, Armenia's stock and stake in Washington has gone up.
If I'm not mistaken, you said that you expect you expect Pashinyan's visit to DC. What can you say on meeting between, for example, possible meeting with Trump, Pashinyan, or?
I think that bilateral relations will develop. I think that takes time. I think it's a matter of developing an agenda. So if the Prime Minister comes to Washington, Washington will expect certain things out of Armenia, and Armenia needs to expect certain things out of Washington. So it has to have an agenda that both sides benefit from that relationship. So what we in the Armenian Assembly do is build a stronger US-Armenian relations based on those agendas and those shared values. So we try to understand what both sides are looking for and echo or raise the profile so that both sides understand that they have some shared values in the region.
Especially after Mr. John Bolton's visit to Armenia last year. So there are some opinions that US-Armenian relations, military, economic, political relations would enter a new phase. So what can you say? What kind of developments do you expect on this?
National Security Secretary Bolton, when he came to our advisor, when he came to Armenia, we see that as a positive sign. I think Armenia needs to do what's in its best interest on the security front. So it will balance off its relations with the United States, with Europe, and with Russia and other players to understand what they're getting from those partners. Obviously, we're encouraged and always appreciative that the Armenian government has a balanced relationship with the United States, with Russia, and it deploys its peacekeepers to various regions, whether it be Afghanistan, Kosovo, and now Syria, which seems to be somewhat of a contention for the United States. But as far as I'm concerned, the U.S. has a community, Armenia has a community in Syria, and must also send peacekeeper humanitarian aid to places where it also has Armenians at risk. And clearly they're at risk right now in Syria.
You know, after the Velvet Revolution, Armenian society, Armenian authorities have some kind of hopes that United States would provide new assistance for new Armenia. So, but unfortunately, we haven't some such assistance from United States, and in addition, we have some kind of talks that American assistance would be, reduced. So, what can you say on this?
I think actually American assistance has gone up. I mean, we had asked for $100 million the last time we spoke, and with the $40 million supplemental that was put through, instead of getting less, Armenia should get more. It doesn't happen overnight, and I agree with you. I'm somewhat frustrated that there isn't more assistance, and that's what we have to look for. Also, we are very concerned about Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has military assistance coming from the United States with the understanding that it's going to secure their borders from Iran. I don't believe it. I think it's a bad move by the United States. We've told the administration so, and there needs to be parity between what Armenia gets and what Azerbaijan gets in terms of military and military operations funding.
Could you say, could you provide some specific figures on American assistance to Armenia, to Artsakh, for next year?
So it's somewhere between, we don't know the numbers quite yet, but it's somewhere between 28 to $60 million. For Artsakh, it's always been around $5 million. They tried to eliminate that. We pushed hard, and I believe there will still be monies available for Artsakh. And then Armenia, depending on what they're funding, I see it between 35 to $40 million, $45 million of funding.
You know that recently there are opinions that America may recognize the fact of Armenian genocide in the context of new tensions between Washington and Ankara. Sure. Do you see some kind of prospect?
This issue always comes up, and anytime Turkey's stock goes down, the president or the Congress starts talking about genocide recognition. Certainly, I think Congress is sincere. I think in large part, if there was a vote today in the House, they would recognize the genocide. Where we are right now is, recently, a month ago, we had an advocacy conference in Washington, and we asked all the major Democratic candidates, VP Biden, Vice President Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, all gave letters saying they would recognize the Armenian genocide. And I have no doubt that they're from places whether they've already recognized the genocide in public. And someone like Vice President Biden, even though under Barack Obama he pushed hard, it didn't get recognized, he knows the issue so well. So when I saw Vice President Biden recently, he said, I didn't even bring it up. He said this was a genocide and this is ridiculous. So in his words, he believes that it is a genocide. The president, on the other hand, I think is playing off some bargaining chips, one for the other. So it really depends. I know that Prime Minister or President Erdogan is coming to the United States. We'll have to see where that ends up. And I don't think right now President Trump is going to use that card unless Turkey really goes south on the United States.
Next year, America would face elections. So, what is your interest? What can you say on this?
So again, elections in the United States is quite a fluid process. The Armenian Assembly is nonpartisan, so we look at it from both sides. But I will say I'm greatly concerned about where we are in America right now. Certainly, President Trump is in a very tenuous situation. After the situation in Ukraine and now the situation with the Kurds, Americans are, and myself, are very concerned about where we are in our standing in the world. You can't walk away from an ally and think that this is going to be something that is going to sit well with the electorate. Even U.S. generals, Secretary of Defense Mattis resigned. Other generals have come out just this week and said the president is unfit to serve. I find that to be very, very troubling. As an American, we want to see our president and our government offer great pride to us, and also sincere leadership to do the right thing. When General McRaven says, we as Americans have to teach our children to be compassionate, walking away from the Kurds and leaving them when they were fighting with us side by side is a grave, grave loss, and it's a real problem. Personally, as a grandchild of a genocide survivor, when I saw Kurdish people walking on those paths that our grandparents walked, very, very difficult. So we have a very, very personal interest, but I would say Americans will not allow or will not see a leader who just walks away from its allies. And then that reflects on Armenia. How does Armenia, a government that looks for solid partners, how do they look to the United States when they can walk away from their allies? I had very good personal relationships with, and the Armenian Assembly has throughout the years, with our diplomats. We knew Marie Yovanovitch very well. We worked with her. Excellent diplomat, a real professional, knew exactly what she was doing. And she was removed as US ambassador to Ukraine. That's a real problem. When you have such well-prepared advisors to the United States, and if you go right through the list, Harry Gilmore, Ambassador Thompson, Lemon, Ambassador Heffron, Yovanovitch, Ordway, Evans, Mills, now Lynn Tracy. These are best of class ambassadors for the United States. You need to take their advice. You can't walk away from them or take them out of that position when they call real troubling aspects of what's being done in Ukraine. And now you have the same situation with the Kurds, that our US generals are saying, this is wrong what we're doing. You have to listen to your top advisors. These will trickle down to the soldiers on the battlefield. If we don't do the right thing in the United States, then it's going to reflect on our reputation and how others view us.
Mr. Barsamian, if we're talking about your projects, I mean assembly projects here in Armenia, what can you say in this context?
Well, first of all, we have high-level relations, and we believe we have great credibility with the administration here in Armenia. We're honest with them. We tell them what's happening in Washington so that they can develop their policy. Secondly, we have organizations that we work with that are part of us, similar to an NGO. So the Armenia Tree Project is a project that we have here in Armenia. We've planted 6 million trees. It's the 25th anniversary of the Armenia Tree Project here in Armenia. And we look to the government of Armenia to do the right thing. This administration is very pro-environment. They just pledged to plant 10 million trees. We're excited by that news, and we want to see how we're going to work with them to increase our $6 million tree planting and to increase it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.